hope everyone is doing well this evening. My name is Indira Mukherjee. I am the Assistant Manager Information Access Services at the Central Library of Queens. Before my colleague Simone Wellington introduces tonight's author, I would like to provide you with some Queens Public Library announcements. It's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. This May, Queens Public Library honors a legacy of leadership and resilience, celebrating the strength, vision, and lasting impact of AANHPI leaders who have paved the way for future generations. Join us for special programs, book recommendations, and more at queenslib.org/AANHPI 2025. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and QPL is joining the national movement to bring awareness to mental health and to fight the stigma that surrounds it. We are also offering programs, workshops, and resources designed to help teens and adults build the coping strategies that will assist them now and in the future. Visit queenslibrary.org to learn more. Stay connected to Queens Public Library on social media. It's where you will find great QPL content, updates about what's happening at the library, and much more. Search for us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, YouTube, and X. And don't forget, we have an Instagram just for QPL teens too. Now let me over to Simone. Simone, it's all yours.
Hello, good evening, Queen's Library, and by extension, our guest, Mr. Robert Jones Jr. Thank you for joining us today. A little bit about Mr. Jones. He is formerly known on social media as Son of Baldwin, is a Brooklyn, New York-based writer and public speaker. He is the author of the New York Times best-selling novel, The Prophets, which won the 2022 Publishing Triangle Edmund White Award for debut fiction, and was a finalist for the 2021 National Book Award for Fiction. His writings have been featured in the New York Times, Essence, Variety, and the Paris Review, as well as in the critically acclaimed anthologies 400 Souls and the 1619 Project. The Prophets was named one of the 25 most influential works of post-war queer literature by the New York Times. Subscribe to Robert's newsletter, Witness, at robertjonesjr.substack.com. So thank you so much, Mr. Jones or Robert, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Simone and Indira, and the Queens Public Library for having me. I want to say before I get started with the reading that these are the times in which we have to be fiercely protective of the work of our libraries. We are at a moment when knowledge is being burned before our eyes. Our institutions are being defunded such that we cannot have access to particular kinds of knowledge. So the only way we can stop this is together. And I'm hoping that everyone within the sound of my voice ensures that they support the library, speak to their politicians to ensure that we are protecting not just our libraries, but the staff of the libraries, our librarians. When I was a little kid, the library was one of my safe havens. And it is where most of my love of reading and writing was nurtured. And we want to continue that tradition for centuries and centuries and centuries. Thank you for listening to my little spiel. So I'm going to be reading today from my debut novel, The Prophets, which is essentially a love story between two young men named Samuel and Isaiah, who are enslaved on a plantation in antebellum Mississippi around the 1830s. And the story revolves around how they survive on this plantation in this, what is an unusual space. We don't normally think of enslaved people as having love or sexuality or things of that nature. And that was one of the reasons why I wrote this book is the legendary Toni Morrison once said, if you cannot find the book you wish to read, then you must write it. And I could not find anywhere in the canon a story about two young Black men in love prior to the Harlem Renaissance. And so I had to write this book. And to set up the scene for you, this is where Samuel and Isaiah's love for one another begins to become a problem on the plantation because the owner of the plantation, Paul, begins to suspect that they are unclean, as he would think, in their queerness. And he has employed some of the other enslaved people to sort of disrupt what Samuel and Isaiah share. And in this section that I'm reading, Samuel and Isaiah are in conversation or in conflict about how to handle going forward with this new normal. It's from a chapter called Leviticus. Isaiah wouldn't allow himself to be crushed by the heaviness or by Samuel's attempt to stack more on top of it. He stood erect. He took 2 steps toward Samuel. He looked him in his eyes, then looked away to gather his thoughts. Samuel, meanwhile, had planted his feet and cracked his knuckles. "You right. Sorry," Isaiah said as he returned to gaze into Samuel's squinting eyes. "I should have done more, but I ain't want to do nothing to make Amos think he got the upper hand or make the people think we was what he said we was." Samuel's lips were dry and ashy, so he licked them. His tongue darted out, drenching first the bottom, then the top. He tasted salt. He put his hand on the handle of the pitchfork. "Folks listen to Amos. Maybe we should," he said. His grip on the pitchfork was loose and unsure. "No," Isaiah said quickly. "I young as you, but this I know, 'cause it don't take long to learn it. Anybody with a whip gon' use it, and people without one gon' feel it." Samuel snatched up the pitchfork. "Amos ain't got no whip," he said as he began furiously to fork hay. "But folks finna obey him just the same," Isaiah countered. Samuel stopped and let the pitchfork fall. It hit the ground with a thud. The 2 of them just stood there, silent, not looking at each other, but both breathing heavily, audibly. Finally, Samuel cracked the silence in half. "I can't stay here." "Who can't?" asked Isaiah. Samuel paused. He had no answer that would satisfy. The realization made his chest burn and his face itch. He clapped his sweaty palms. The sudden, sharp sound stirred a horse or 2 before it dissipated. It didn't distract Isaiah, however. He kept his gaze steady, his face still prepared to receive an answer to his question. "You ain't never talked like this before," Isaiah said gently. "Maybe not talk," Samuel replied. "But think? Can't be. Even in the midnight hour?" In Isaiah's eyes was a mist, nighttime, and 2 sets of callous feet creeping alongside a riverbank. Owls hooted, and the snap of fallen branches being cracked in half by heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Far behind, a point of light and voices of wild men laughing, a glint of metal seen by the shine of the moon, and 2 sets of feet speed up into the wet of the river, muddy and tired. Then two whole bodies submerge, and though frantic, refuse to make a splash for fear of attracting the attention of jackals disguised as men. The silence provides no shelter, and the wildness catches up to them and drags them by their feet out of the water, over jagged rocks, through broken woods until they come upon a row of bitter, eager trees willing to perform acts of vengeance in the name of stolen fruit. The men have ropes, laughter, and fingers hooked into triggers. The men bind their prey. Nooses burn necks. Tightened, they block air. Then the eyes constrict and throats mourn the denial of screaming. Pull, pull, and up into the air the bodies go, kicking the nothing around them, flying nowhere. After a while, tuckered out down to the soul, they go limp, an offense to the gods of wicked laughter. So they unload their weapons into the dead already. Then they douse the bodies with oil and set them aflame. They think it's a campfire, so they sing songs. Look at the monkeys, swinging, swinging from the trees. The flames eventually die and bodies eventually drop. The wild men fight over the best pieces to take home. When Isaiah snapped back to the barn, it dawned on him that he had been standing there the entire time, and neither he nor Samuel had even attempted to touch the other. He moved a step closer and stroked Samuel's cheek with the back of his hand, his rough knuckles finding comfort against Samuel's smooth skin. Samuel closed his eyes, leaned into the rhythm of Isaiah's motion before finally grabbing Isaiah's hand and holding it in place against his face. Samuel kissed Isaiah's hand. There's danger in the wilderness, Isaiah unloaded. He figured that it was only fair that the both of them share the weight of it. Samuel lifted it, inspected it, and noticed a crack in it. Those monkey swinging bodies, they dared go down without a fight? There's danger here, Samuel replied. He cut his eyes, almost with cruelty, at Isaiah and picked up the pitchfork again. Isaiah grabbed him by the wrist. He stared into Samuel's face, searching for an opening, however small. Don't break us, man. Ain't I here? Samuel asked, not exactly returning Isaiah's gaze. You see me or not? He pulled himself from Isaiah's grasp and returned to the pitchfork and his drudgery. For a moment, Isaiah didn't move. He was oddly calmed by the repetitious sound of Samuel's forking, the consistency of his 1-2 motion. I could do it, you know, Samuel said at last. Make it with all those women's, but I just don't wanna. Isaiah stepped back. He turned his mouth to one side. You ain't never think that? Isaiah asked him. Samuel asked him, excuse me. So you want to hurt two people, not just one. Isaiah looked around the barn, at the horses in the stables, at the haystacks, at the tools that hung on rusty nails hammered haphazardly into the barn walls, at the roof and its intersection of wooden beams. He looked and looked as though it were his mind and he was searching for the answer to Samuel's question, but all he could find were cracks. Sometimes I don't even know you, Isaiah said out loud, still looking at the barn walls. You know me. I be the you don't let free. Isaiah was going to say, you mean the me I've been freed, but didn't see the point. Sure, they thank you for it, he replied instead. The women's, I mean, for being able to. Pua especially. Samuel scowled. You jealous? Maybe, but not why you think. Just saying, If you feel to stay here, be easier if Isaiah cut him off. Whatever you decide is blessed. With force, Samuel let out some air through his nose and raised it. You different. He didn't mean to say it out loud, but it was too late. It had already middle finger plucked Isaiah on the forehead, pinched his arm as a cross mother would. All Isaiah could do was rub the places that stung and give Samuel the eyes that conveyed his surrender. Samuel stood there and for the first time was disturbed by the stench of the barn and the way it stuck to his skin. He noticed that underneath the saltiness was something sour, like food left to rot. He held his nose for a moment and suppressed the urge to heave. Finally, he walked over to the pails that Isaiah had put down. Let me do this. You pitch the hay, he said as he picked up the pails and headed outside. He felt Isaiah's eyes on his back, yes, but also his caress. But he didn't stop. He went to the cows. They greeted him tumultuously, mooing their anxiety. You looking for Zay, huh? He said to them. He sat down on a tiny wooden stool and waved away the flies that circled his head. I beg your pardon, he said to the nearest cow. Then he grabbed her teats and started to pull. Thank you.
Wow, it was wonderful reading. And this, I'm sure, audience will have an idea of like where did they work and what was their relationship. Only they would know what happened to the end. For that, they have to read the book. Now, my first question to you is, uh, it's a historical fiction.
Yes.
So I'm sure you must have done a lot of research on the history before you come up with this book. So I would like to know the whole research process from conception of the plot, or I mean conception of the story, until it handed to the people's hand. So how was your process, the journey of your?
Well, I should say up front that it took 14 years for me to write this novel. And part of that was because I was imagining wholesale something that had never been explored before in fiction, in terms of in novel writing, at least, where I was going to talk about queer sexuality in a way that wasn't based in abuse or sexual assault, but was founded in love. So when I was an undergraduate student at Brooklyn College, shout out to CUNY, I was a creative writing major and an Africana Studies minor. And it was so important that I was an Africana Studies minor because I was exposed to so much beautiful writing from writers Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Wallace Thurman, Zora Neale Hurston, Phyllis Wheatley, and the list goes on. And in discovering these works, I realized that there was a tradition that I had of writing, of literature that I had missed out on because when I was in high school, my most of what was on the syllabus for us to read were mainly white male authors. And we did not read at all any Black authors, male or female. So this was all very new to me. And I was very anxious to find instances of the Black queer experience in these works. And I found them in works by like Wallace Thurman and James Baldwin. And the question for me was always, did Black queerness begin during the Harlem Renaissance? Are there any examples of this happening, queer sexuality being explored prior to the Harlem Renaissance in Black culture. And so I started looking, and the only instances I found were those of abuse or sexual assault. So in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, she describes an instance in which a male enslaved person is chained to the master's bed, and that the master would use him for untoward purposes, which by which she meant rape. Um, and then in Toni Morrison's Beloved, there's a scene in which one of her characters, Paul D, is sexually assaulted by a male overseer. And I thought, I'm certain these sorts of incidences happened because slavery was a brutal, brutal system. But my question was, what about love? And in order to find the answer to that question, I could not find it in the American canon. I had to go to African stories that were passed down from generation to generation. So oral histories on the African continent. And one in particular was by an amazing Ghanaian scholar named, her name escapes me right now. But she was talking about how her, Esther Arma, that's her name, Esther Arma. And she was talking about how the people she comes from, which are the Ga people, if you had asked them, do you have homosexuality in your culture? They would say no, because they didn't understand what that word meant. And for us as Americans, we would take that to mean, oh, there were no gay people, no queer people, no trans people in Ga culture. But Esther Arma corrects us, and she says, but if you had explained what you meant by homosexuality, they would go, oh, you mean love. Because for them, there was no need to distinguish heterosexuality, homosexuality, transgenderness. It was just one whole human experience. And that was the key that unlocked me to be able to tell this story, that there was a lineage that I could return to, that I was not imagining this. And it took me so long to write it because in undergrad, I was working 3 part-time jobs. In grad school, I was working 2 part-time jobs. And then when I graduated, I had a full-time job. And so what I had to do is say to myself, if you're serious about your craft, you have to carve out a time, whatever time it is, to commit to it, just like you commit to that 9 to 5. So the only time that I could find was 3 o'clock in the morning, which I call the magic hour. So I would set my alarm to go off at 3, and I would write for 1 hour from 3 to 4, go back to sleep afterwards, and then get up again at 6:30 to get ready for work. And I did that for 14 years until I had a completed first draft. And the rest is kind of history.
That is so amazing. So your story, it pulls from different elements, and it's almost as though, because with slavery, you don't hear about love. And it's almost as though you're going against the grain, pulling from James Baldwin and Toni Morrison and Miss Hurston. That is a sort of a rebellious, like, I'm going to write not what you're going to think about. So it gives the reader a sense of wow, and draws them to the prophets. How were you able just to capture that? Because it's so powerful. And like you said, you wrote from 3 to 4, which we would call the magic hour. So it's as though you're, and then some people call it the witching hour. So you're drawing on this strong energy to write this book, which is outstanding. So what are your, like, I don't know. I'm so excited. Like, what are your thought patterns? Like when you're doing this and you're knowing, I know I have something, because I feel that energy.
it's funny that you say energy, because that is exactly what I was experiencing during that magic hour, which I think is the time in which the membrane, the wall between this world and the next is thinnest, and where I can hear my ancestors. I don't know if it's, a figment of my imagination, or what, but that was the hour in which I could hear the whispers, and I would pay close attention because I knew that they had something to tell me. And so they were guiding me in a sense. I would, for example, write a line, and something about it didn't feel right. It didn't vibrate correctly. And I felt like that was the ancestors telling me, no, 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 not quite that. Try again. And when I got it again, then I felt like this, okay, I can see this character. I can hear their voice. That is the right line for this character. And it was a process of that, of um, trying something and it not working, and then thinking about it relentlessly until I come up with something that felt more organic, more real, more magical, more um, able to convey what I think was the profoundness of this story. Like, I wanted to convey these really, really big ideas. And so the words had to match. And that was really, really hard. But one of the things you learn in an MFA program is that the whole point of writing is revision. And so you're constantly honing and shaping and refining. Um, and you can almost never be done. Somebody else has to actually come in, an editor or someone else, to say, okay, that's enough. We're ready to go. Because I could have kept writing this for another 14 years, to be honest. So in terms of where it comes from, it's um, as a writer, you have to be remarkably observant. So it was me remembering things from when I was a child and visiting my great aunts down south in South Carolina, and remembering how they did things, how they protected themselves, how they cooked, how they walked about, how brave they were, how they didn't need men, how they could do everything on their own because they had to. Paying homage to that was how I came up with, for example, characters like Maggie and Sarah. Was remembering my great aunt Annie and my great grandmother Mary. So a lot of it was memory, and the other part was relentless observation. And living in New York City, you get to observe all kinds of people. So I was very lucky.
Thank you so much. We already have a couple of questions in the chat, so let me read it out to you. The first one,
Okay.
Megan said, your prose is so stunning to read and to listen to. What were the books you read um, during the creation of the prophets? And how did it affect your writing, if it did? What was your daily writing process like?
Okay. Thank you, Megan, for those questions. Um, yes, I was one of the core tenets of being a writer is be a reader first. And so it was up to me to like really spend a good amount of time reading, not just for pleasure, which I read for pleasure and I love to read, but also for techniques. How did James Baldwin craft this sentence? How did Toni Morrison structure this novel? Um, how did Zora Neale Hurston um, write these particular kinds of dialect? So I was asking myself those sorts of questions so that when it came time for me to write the prophets, I was aware of the ways in which I could possibly construct the novel or deviate from how Baldwin, Morrison, or Hurston had done it. And those were the authors I was reading. I was reading The Blacker the Berry by Wallace Thurman. I was reading Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Beloved by Toni Morrison. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Corregidora by Gail Jones. Um, Ma, Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. So there were quite a number. Black women writers in particular had a really big impact on how I wrote The Prophets, because Black women writers don't have the luxury of being deceitful. They have to tell you like it is. And one of the things I wanted to do was be able to tell it like it was. And at the same time, give these characters their full roundness, not turn them into these flat sort of stereotypes that we often see in slave narratives. I wanted the reader to understand that these were people. They were not slaves. They were people who had lives and loves and losses and felt all of those things. And in terms of what my daily practice was like, as I was saying earlier, I got up at 3 o'clock every morning and kept writing and kept writing. And then after the book was sold to a publisher, then it was a daily check-in with my editor to say, here's where I am, or to get feedback from her to say, what's working, what's not working, how do we fix it? And then in those periods, there's some frustrations because you're kind of like you're at a loss for what to do, but it is the job of the editor to kind of guide you through that. So that's what it was like for me daily writing The Prophets.
Thank you so much. And I can guarantee that if you woke up every morning like 3 o'clock, so you heard a lot of bird chirping, which I never do, which I never do. Uh, there is another question, AW. I don't know what the name is. The question is, did you feel the need to censor the intimate parts of their relationship to make the content more easily digestible for readers?
That is the first time anyone has ever asked that question, and that's an amazing question. I did feel a bit of pressure to not make Samuel and Isaiah's relationship as explicit as maybe it should have been, because I was afraid that people would be offended by the idea that I'm writing about two queer men during a period in which Black people in particular find uh, sacrosanct. It's almost not to be spoken of, this period of our history, as though it were our shame and not the shame of the people who committed the terrible acts. But I had the benefit of my agent, PJ Marks, who told me, Robert, don't be coy. Put it up front, because I had a lovemaking scene between Samuel and Isaiah that happened way back in the book. And he said, no, put that up front so that people know what they're getting from the jump. And so I did feel a kind of pressure to focus more on the romantic aspects of their relationship rather than the sexual. But my agent helped me to understand that it needed to be upfront. Thank you for that question.
Okay, and so we also have another question by Estella. Why The Prophets? How did you come up with the title of the book, or what inspired you?
Okay, thank you for that question. The original name of The Prophets was Sing Hannibal, Bear Witness. And it was going to be told from the perspective of a character named Hannibal, who eventually became Isaiah. And Hannibal was going to be questioned by an abolitionist just after slavery about asking Hannibal about his life. And Hannibal was going to reveal that he had been in love with this man, and this is what their life on the plantation was like. And that was going to be the story. So sort of like a slave narrative. But I quickly realized that that was too small, that Hannibal's perspective would have been too narrow, and I would not have been able to talk about all of the other aspects of the plantation that I wanted to talk about if I kept it to his perspective to his point of view. And so I expanded it so that all of these characters, Maggie, even the owners of the plantation, have a point of view about Samuel and Isaiah's relationship, such that we get this like multifaceted revelation about what it would have been like for two Black queer men to exist in that time on a plantation under an already brutal system. Um, and in identifying that as a revelation, I thought, so these characters are really prophets, because prophets communicate a kind of information, they witness a kind of testimony. And so even the ones that have something negative to say about Samuel and Isaiah's relationship, that too is a revelation, maybe about not about Samuel and Isaiah, but about themselves. And so that is kind of where I got the idea to call this book The Prophets, and to also tie it to a kind of Christian worldview, since Christianity played such a large role in, one, subjugating Africans and making them into slaves, and two, indoctrinating Black communities against the ideas of queerness and transness.
Thank you so much. I believe there is another question Megan asked. What part of the story came to you first? Did you create a chapter by chapter plan for the book, or did you write what came to your heart during the magic hour, or
Oh,
somewhere else in between?
that is a good question. Thank you, Megan. What part of the book came to me first? So characters always come to me first before story. Like I have a little rough idea of where I might or what I want to talk about, but I don't really know how to make the story possible until the characters can kind of tell me who they are. So the characters come to me first, and Isaiah was the first character to come to me. And then the character that eventually became Samuel was the second character who came to me. And then the third character who came to me was Maggie, who is the elder stateswoman of the plantation. Um, and what winds up happening is I have them interact. And when they interact, it sort of blossoms so that the story starts to unveil itself to me. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so who is Maggie and where is she coming from? And how would she react to this? And so then it helps me to broaden. So who's Maggie's foil? Who would be the opposite of Maggie in this situation? And so that the character Amos is then born from that. And so I have this sort of tapestry of all of these characters, and the way I knit them together becomes the story. And so I start with character, and then the conflicts come, and then the story comes. Was there another question attached to that other than
It says, or some, no, this is
okay,
the one, this is what it is.
okay.
And I would like to ask a question. How did you pilot, like writing about the Black queer love in a time frame where these identities were like a big no-no, were not only oppressed, but often undocumented? So how
Yes.
did you pilot writing it?
You know, it I one of the great things about being a fiction writer is that your imagination is available to you. I don't have to worry about, well, is it true, or is it factual? Because there's a sense somewhere inside you that it had to be true. Um, that there had to be Black, queer, enslaved people who, for whatever their reasons, whether safety or shame or what have you, kept their stories to themselves. Um, and it's so funny because after I was done with the prophets, there came a story about a man who was thought to be America's first drag queen, was also an enslaved person. And so it was sort of validation that what I thought was a figment of my imagination was really me just giving voice and testimony to those whose voices were silenced and erased.
That is awesome. That is totally, totally awesome. And the title of the book, The Prophets, okay? A prophet is a divine person, a strong, strong figure in a community. Who in the book, which characters in the book would you anoint or give that homage to? As like, okay, so this person, or it could be more than one person. I'm just a little curious to find out how it correlates. Sorry.
For me, the most the character that I think is the most profoundly prophetic is Maggie. Because Maggie is aware of her own humanity. She realizes that what is being done to her is not a reflection on her, but a reflection on those doing it to her. She also understands where she comes from, which is very important in terms of surviving an attempt to bring you down from where you belong. She's the one who remembers the old wisdom that had been passed down from mother to son to daughter to mother to father to son, from all the way back to the African continent. And she understands her role in conveying that information so that it doesn't die with her. She, to me, who, as I said earlier, is based on my my great grandmother and my great aunts, who I spent summers with down in South Carolina. I was very fortunate to have known my great grandmother and her sisters and her brothers. It, for me, kept like this golden thread of here's the wisdom that you're going to need to survive being in a world that is hostile to the fact that you're here. Like a prophet does. Prophet gives you information for survival, and the expectation that now that you are freed by this information, your job is to free somebody else. So Maggie, definitely.
Great. Thank you. You know, we have another questions, but before we read that question out, there is a comment. It says, Fiona said, absolutely beautiful work. I have had The Prophet since 2021, and I'm so glad to see its success and impact. That's a comment from Fiona.
Thank you,
And then,
Fiona. That's very kind.
and there is a question from Raz. Could you speak more about the love these characters feel for each other? It is both multi-layered, raw, and accepting of who they are to themselves and each other.
You know, thank you for that question, Roz. It was really important for me to ensure that love was the central force of this novel, because on one end, there's this sort of pathology that seems to insist that Black people are incapable of love, that we are barbarians, savages, that love is some higher emotion that we're incapable of feeling or displaying. If you go back, you'll remember Thomas Jefferson said of Phillis Wheatley that there's no way she could possibly be a poet. She could not have access to the feelings required of a poet or the intellect required of a poet, even though she was clearly brilliant. So I wanted to push back against that idea. The other was, so now I'm Robert Jones Jr. writing in the present, writing the prophets in the present, and I'm seeing the ways in which sometimes Black communities can be pitted against one another. And I'm thinking about the ways in which the only answer to solving those wounds, the only thing that can heal them, is love. And I don't mean love in the Hollywood sense, but I mean it in the old way in which it's, I take care of you because I love you. I can do you no harm because I love you. I protect you because I love you, and I expect the same from you. We are community, and I mean that in the most clearest terms. And so when forming Samuel and Isaiah, the chief in my mind was what's gonna matter more than anything else. Even when they're in conflict, it's going to be clear to the reader that these are two people who are in love, because that kind of love is real. It is possible. It's a witness. Love had to be there.
So we have another question. Well, both question and comment from Michael. Michael says, thank you. I had the opportunity to read the book in the Brooklyn College reading group and learned from you 2 years ago and still thinking about it frequently. Your 10 boxes of comics just at the edge of the frame is a fantastic flex. In your newsletter, you've talked about several times about your love of comics. How did your lifelong comic reading impact the writing of this book? So that's the first. And an alternate question, as a horror lover and a lover of Black people, anything you want to share about Sinners?
Oh, I love
That's a loaded one.
Michael, Mike, thank you so much for these questions. So how I became a writer is that my father, Robert Jones Sr., rest his soul, when I was age 4, he bought me a comic book. He bought me a Wonder Woman comic book, and to this day I still love Wonder Woman. He bought me a Wonder Woman comic book, and I was so fascinated by this idea of this island of powerful women who lived there because they were sick and tired of man's cruelty to other human beings. And they developed a society based on peace and principles like love. And they invented ways to defend themselves that had to do with perfecting the body. They had bracelets that could deflect bullets, and tiaras that could be used as boomerangs, and magic ropes that can make people tell the truth. That just set my imagination on fire. And I was 4 years old, so I didn't know how to write yet, and I could barely read. But because I was so interested in that, that drove my love, my intent to read and my love of writing. So I wrote my very first micro story when I was 6 years old about me being Wonder Woman's sidekick. And that was the birth of it. So, I never recognized that comic books had a direct impact on the way I write fiction. But my editor said that the way that I play with time, the way that I convey action has a very comic book feel to it. So it impacted me in ways that I was not even aware of. Blessings to comic books. And in terms of Sinners, I actually saw Sinners twice. I was actually invited to the premiere of Sinners, so I actually got to meet the cast. And what I saw was something that I had never seen before. I was so incredibly impressed by the innovation of Sinners. Just from the look of the film itself, the depth of field of it, the crisp way in which Ryan Coogler shot the film, the beautiful way in which he rendered these characters, such that Black skin on the screen didn't appear in the shadows or anything like that. They were up front and well lit. Um, and then I'm not going to spoil it for people who have not seen the movie, but there's a scene in the juke joint where I don't even know how Mr. Coogler um, directed this scene, but it is something that I have never seen in cinema before. I was blown away by the creativity of this scene in the juke joint, and it happens during a musical scene, where I can't spoil it, but it is, you have to see the movie to see what I'm talking about. The second time I saw the film, because the first time I was so wrapped up in the fact that I'm sitting a row behind Michael B. Jordan that I couldn't really focus the way I wanted to focus. But the second time that I went to go see the film, it made me cry. That scene, I literally started crying at that scene because I knew that I was in the presence of something great and something that I had never seen before. And what it has done for me, I'm working on my next novel. What it has done for me is it opened up the space for what I can say and what I can do within the world of this novel. So thank you again, Michael, for those questions.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
You spoke about the tribe in Ghana. What was the name of it before?
The,
It was a
the
Ga.
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 Yeah.
And what came to pass is love, and love has no eyes. Love is just. Do you think that you incorporate that tribal practice into the book as well? Because the way how it was written, it's just, it just is. I don't know how to explain it. It's just as though that this is how it is, how it's supposed to be. You know, Trinidad have a little saying, what is to is will is. So that's how it feels. Like that whole concept of you're just writing from a place of love, no boundaries, no sight. So did you pull some of that energy from the tribe as well?
Absolutely. One of the things that the prophets is kind of pushing back against is this idea of we are not of one people. So the prophets is influenced by certainly African culture, and there are chapters in the book which I did not explain before that actually go back to a before time in Africa before Europe had entered and enslaved. There are influences from the Caribbean in the book. There's some, if you'll read some of the sentences, and some of the sentence structures are Caribbean in their appearance and in their the way they're spoken. And there are characters who are in this book who passed through the Caribbean and brought some of what they learned here into America. So this idea that there's continental African, there's West Indian, and there's African American, and we are all distinct and different. On my mother's side, my mother's mother, her people are Gullah people. Their accents are almost indistinguishable from Bajans. So this idea that we are split and separate, that to me strikes me as a divide and conquer tactic. We have a lot more in common than we don't. And I think we should start looking beyond artificial borders when we think about things like community. So yes, tribe had a direct impact on that.
I have a favorite question to ask, which I always ask all the authors. Like, when Robert is not writing, what does he enjoy doing? Do any of your hobbies or your passions that some way like influence your writing? I mean, in any way.
Thank you for that question, Indira. When I'm not writing, I'm reading, watching TV or movies, listening to music. In my family, music played a huge role. My grandfather grew up with Thelonious Monk, the jazz musician, so we would listen to jazz. My grandmother was the biggest fan of Sam Cooke, so I know Sam Cooke's music. My mother was a Motown woman and she loved her divas. So Patti LaBelle, Dionne Warwick, Diana Ross, Stephanie Mills. I know all of those people. And then my aunt was a big fan of the Jackson 5 and Prince. And then, so all of those things were a big musical influence. And if you read the prophets in a certain way, you will hear a particular kind of musicality. And that music had a direct impact on that. And also, I like to walk around the city. One of my favorite things to do is walk through places like the Cloisters or Central Park or Prospect Park, green spaces. And that always gives me ideas about how to render nature when I'm writing in the book. So yes, those things have a
Thank
direct
you.
impact.
Thank you so much. And I would like to ask another question about book banning. I
Okay.
believe the writing a book is an author's creative freedom, right? So now, how do you think the book banning can affect that?
You know, there was one time where I thought that book banning was sort of like a badge of honor because it was like saying you wrote something so important that it scares people and they want to ban it. But then I realized if I'm writing something so important, because like when I'm writing the prophets, I'm writing this to the Black queer child who doesn't know he has a place in the world. If the book gets banned, how does he get that message that he has a place in the world? Our children suffer, they nearly suffocate from not being able to access certain books because we deem them to be offensive or what have you. Children should be exposed to these ideas, especially fiction, because what the study shows that fiction help convey critical thinking and a sense of empathy because they put you in somebody else's shoes. And what are we lacking most in this time, particularly in this country right now, is critical thinking. I'm starting with the person that was elected president of this country, no critical thinking whatsoever, and empathy, because we look at our fellow human beings and we don't see ourselves in them, such that we could turn our heads away from bombing children in hospitals and schools. So book banning is the devil, as my grandmother would say. um, and it is something that we have to really fight against. And I think libraries on the front lines. And that's why, as I said in the beginning, it is very important for the community to come together to support libraries.
Well, Robert, this has been such an exciting and wonderful interview. And I'm sure that you've done our ancestors proud, paying homage, to our audience. Thank you for coming to the interview, and your questions were so beautiful. I'm sorry that we had other questions, but we have to wrap up. I am so sorry, but everybody is saying thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I would like to
when will
make
we
an
have
announcement.
your next book? Will you be coming out with another book pretty soon? What's your follow-up before we wrap up?
My goal is to get I'm working on another book, and my goal is to get the first draft to my agent by summer.
Okay.
So if the process with the prophets is the same, if it's the same process, it'll be about a year or two before you see it on the shelves.
Okay. Ashe, it was a wonderful, wonderful interview. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you so much, everybody. And next week, we are going to have on May 22nd, when Marlene Duet will be here, who will join us to discuss the book, The First and the Last King of Haiti. So thank
Yes.
you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And thanks, Robert,
Thank
for being
you. Have
here.
a good night, everyone. Thank you
Good
so much,
night.
Robert. Have a good
Good night.
night. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.